Welcome back to another episode of the Invincible Minds podcast. I am your host, Collins Yatanga, and today we are talking about something that everyone faces, yet very few know how to master. That is rejection. My guest today is someone who has built an entire business on turning rejection into power. Alice Draper is the founder of Hustling Writers. She helps business owners break into the industries despite their setbacks. Published in Business Insider, Huffington Post, and Vice, Alice has successfully learned to navigate rejection and use it to fuel her success. Welcome to the podcast, Alice.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. It's really amazing to have you here. Really excited to be able to talk about such a meaningful topic and a topic that will serve and help other people. But before we get into rejection, I just wanted to give my audience a little insight on who you are so that they can get to know you and learn about your journey. And I think a great place to start is understanding your reason why. Everyone has a reason why they do the things that they do. So Alice, what is your reason why, and why do you get up in the morning?
Why do I get up in the morning? We're getting deep very quickly.
Yeah. It's what we do here.
I'm very motivated by the why. So I notice whenever I lose interest, because when you've been in business for a few years, sometimes there's periods where you lose interest. It might be because I don't know what that why is so strongly. Right now, I think that my why in business is all about reframing rejection. So I'm super interested in this as a topic, as a concept, informing how. But I think bigger why is I want to make things accessible. I want to make learning accessible. I want to make business accessible. I'm in the PR space. I want to make PR accessible. I've seen ways in which certain barriers can stop people from ever pursuing things that, in my mind, there's nothing stopping you except your mindset. I know that's a big topic of yours.
Exactly.
So I think my why is making things accessible, and one of those is by reframing rejection.
Okay, that's nice. Reframing rejection. I love the way you put that. And when you talk about making things accessible to who exactly? Who are you speaking to?
That's a good question. I'm quite broad. I'm from South Africa, so initially I saw a lot of, I broke into the American market quite early on, and I saw a lot of South Africans suffering generally in a market that as creatives was not well paid. There were not a lot of opportunities. So initially I really wanted to make these sort of opportunities more accessible to South Africans, to realize that you don't need to be American or from other parts of the world to be working with high-paying clients and to be charging a lot more than they're currently charging. But now, I would say anyone who is under-recognized, marginalized in some shape or form, talented, but has these barriers to entry that could be actual, you can't get banking easily in many countries, or just in their head where they think that they can't access. There are real things that make people believe that they can't, but I think that with the right support and guidance, we can remove some of those barriers.
That's really beautiful to hear. And I think for a lot of us, we go through different phases in life, and access is something that gets us through something, right? Someone opening the door, someone giving us guidance, someone sharing their story, right, is an element of access to be able to become the best version of yourself. So it's really great that, that's a driving mission for you, and it's something that you're serving other people with. And you mentioned that you're of South African origin. So I think we should start there. Let's take a step back and go home. I'm from Zimbabwe. You are from South Africa. We're neighbors.
We're neighbors.
We're neighbors indeed. And I wanted to just talk or just get you to share with us a little bit about what it was like for you growing up in South Africa, and just paint a little picture of us in terms of your upbringing.
Yeah, so I'm sure it's not lost on anyone in the audience that I'm a white South African, and it's not lost on me being on this podcast because I listened to some of your other podcast episodes, and I'm like, there are people who went through a lot more struggles to get where they are than I did. So growing up as a white South African and new post-apartheid South Africa was interesting. And it meant that I was afforded a lot of things that most South Africans are not afforded. So dreams were not shut down for me. I was given a good education. I was told the world is my oyster. I can do whatever I want. And Yeah, but I also grew up in, I think, a somewhat, I don't know, it was an interesting time because I was the first generation I was the first post-apartheid born-free generation. So my school was mixed race, and I have friends of all colors and stuff. So it was very clear to me what racism does, and many of my friends were the first generation to be educated, and it was, a school with all white teachers, and then like 60-70% of the students are black, and I think part of my mission, is that I could see the difference between what was framed to me as accessible by my family, by teachers, versus what was framed to many of my friends. And being first generation, many of my friends were told by their parents, for example, you need to become a teacher, a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, and I was told, be whatever you want. So post-graduation, I'm like, okay, let me start a business. Let me do whatever. And I saw a lot of friends follow these traditional paths, and for some of them it didn't work out because they didn't like it, it wasn't a fit, and they had so much potential, and many of them are actually pursuing businesses now to do other things in an industry that's constantly evolving. And I also think that's part of why information needs to be accessible, because the jobs our parents tell us to do are probably not the only options available. Many of the jobs now, kids in school now, that they will do don't exist. We don't know what jobs they will do because but if they're going to be high earning jobs, they probably don't exist yet. It's probably some job that will be invented through AI. Just like with us, most of us are not doing things that were real options when we were kids, not the typical questions.
No, that's true. And I think I'm glad that you touched on, of course, the challenges and the differences that you experience being obviously a white woman growing up in South Africa. It's such a difficult time, I think, for a lot of people, specifically when we look back at the history. In terms of your mission and how you're serving when it comes to rejection, do you always feel like you fit in that environment? I'm talking about school. You said that, of course, there was 70-80% of black students, and then obviously will be a smaller minority of obviously white students. So how was that dynamic, being in a school where you were the minority? And
I mean, in the schools, because I was in former Model C schools, so in the school system, white South Africans felt comfortable. I'll just put it this way. The schools made black students assimilate to whiteness in a sense. So I don't know if you've ever heard, there was hair protests because the schools would have these very racist rules about how you should have your hair, of course, which is white people hair standards. So you have to fit into a swimming cap, so don't you dare let your natural hair grow out. So definitely I had no identity issues in that sense, but I had other struggles in school. I didn't feel like I fit in. That was nothing to do with race. It was I had undiagnosed ADHD, so I was always told by teachers you're not living up to your potential. You're so smart, but your grades are just okay, and you don't focus, and you stare out of the window all the time, and you're messy, and so I think I, from a young age, kind of internalized there's something wrong with me. I couldn't show up, and I felt the way that I felt other kids showed up. They were on time, and everything was neat, and their desk was neat, and handwriting was neat, and I would try so hard to be like them, but I just couldn't. Yeah, no,
that's true. And I think when you say that, it makes me think about something that I heard previously in terms of when you try to be like someone else, you rob the world of who you are, and no one is a better you than you. But obviously, as a child, as a kid, you don't see that. You're just trying to fit in, try to be part of a community, right? And try to experience life and school the way everyone else is experiencing it. Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, being a child, all you want to do is fit in, to whatever expense. And so I think that's why I didn't feel like I belonged, because I was trying so hard to fit in. Yeah. And as I grew up, luckily, I was able to be more of myself. And stuff like entrepreneurship, I've realized I am an entrepreneur because I have ADHD. I'm able to see things and be adaptable and flexible. and recognize opportunities that I probably wouldn't if I was that good student that followed the rules, because I was really bad at following rules.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So then what was your early journey into writing like? Because you are a writer, it's definitely a skill and a craft that you've perfected over the years. Was that something you discovered in school, in a classroom, or was it something that you inherited at home? Yeah, tell us about like your early journey into writing and how you found that this was something that you're really passionate about.
No one's ever asked me this before, so yeah, exciting.
Nice.
Probably, so I always loved books, and I remember I always loved being like reading as soon as I could read, but before I could read, being read to. And I think I recognized from that age I want to be the person that makes stories.
Yeah.
Like I just loved storytelling. But it was also something I was rewarded for. So, teachers telling me I didn't live up to my potential, but when it came to something writing related, my stuff was read out in class. Like from grade 1, teachers would choose 3 stories to read out, and they'd read out my stories. So I always got that dopamine hit of like, ooh, people like the words that I write. And I loved the feeling of crafting stories. So I knew from a very young age that I wanted to do this. I had many other careers I wanted to be, like it ranged all the time, but I also knew like I'll be a writer and a psychologist, a writer and a teacher, a writer and whatever else. So I went to journalism school, and that was like, I had a bursary option, so it just was natural choice. It was there's writing, and when I was in journalism school, I started freelance writing, and that was just so cool to me because I was making money. Like I was earning in university $25 an hour, and I felt like I was loaded in South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot of money when you do the currency exchange. Right?
And like I went from being like a broke student to being like, whoa, like the world is my oyster. And I loved every process of writing, and I still do.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's really, really nice. Do you remember like the first piece that you ever wrote, as in like the one that made you think like, yes, like this is it? Do you remember what that first piece of writing was?
So I remember the dopamine hits of the first time I was published. I think the first time I was published was like letter of the month for a magazine in South Africa called Saltwater Girl.
Nice.
When I was in high school, and I got like this free bag of makeup and stuff. And I just remember that felt so good because it's like I've been recognized. But the piece that felt like this is one that really resonated. What comes to mind, and I think I've felt good about a lot of pieces I've written, but one that really has stuck around was actually a personal essay I wrote for Refinery 29 in 2021. And it was very vulnerable. It was about being in a like online during COVID online situationship where I never met a person. And then like it was very intense for a few weeks, and then it ended, and then it took me a year. I was writing about it taking me a year to get over this, and like reflecting on kind of all the stuff, the reasons and stuff. And that I had a really great editor who helped me like fine tune it and develop it into a really strong piece. And it also resonated with a lot of people. Like I got emails for weeks after that from people who were going through something similar or had gone through, and it was very affirming because people would be like, I was married, I got divorced, and then I was more affected by like a guy I met traveling for 2 weeks than I was by my divorce. And so it was just nice to feel like I shared a story that affirmed something in people that a lot of people had gone through that they hadn't seen words put to before. Whereas, some of my other pieces, I think that like I enjoyed it and it was good, but I didn't always feel like I said something that no one else had really said before. And I think that's the most... the best feeling as a writer.
That's actually so inspiring, and I'm just trying to add the dots in my head, or connect the dots anyway. So you've been writing for probably at that time over 20 years, right? This is something that you grew up with, you're super, super passionate about, but it wasn't until, I'd say recently, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, the pandemic, that you felt like, okay, now I've arrived as a writer. So I think sometimes we try to rush that process in finding your voice, perfecting your craft, but it's so inspiring that you feel like throughout everything you're doing, even after being published, you still had this thought of like, have I arrived yet? Is this good enough? And then this piece that is vulnerable, that is open, is the one that connects with the world, right? And yeah, there's definitely a big meaning behind that, and something that could really resonate with people.
I actually don't think I've arrived, you know? So you said earlier
Still.
you've perfected the craft, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I definitely haven't. Like, I think
Okay.
there's a long way to go.
Okay.
When I've written a book, and if the book is good, then maybe I'll arrive then.
yeah.
But maybe I'll never feel like I've arrived, and that's okay. That just means that I'll keep doing it forever.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And that is literally the creative's mindset. I think we keep moving the goalpost each and every time. Like, so it's really about enjoying the journey, right? It's
Yeah.
not about a destination. So no, thank you for even framing it like that. It's so beautiful. Just one last question when we're obviously exploring your background and, getting to the root and on this beautiful journey that you've had. Are there any writers, authors from South Africa or Africa in general that impacted you in your journey, in your space? And what was it about them that really made you feel connected to their art?
It's a good question, you know. The name that comes to mind, and it's not really a writer per se, though he has written a book, but I think a really effective communicator is Trevor Noah.
Yeah.
I think he is a master at using story to connect big things, make people see big picture issues, make people empathize, laugh. I don't have the comedian bone, so I definitely can't tap into that part.
Yeah.
But I think he can captivate people's emotions and deliver messages in such a dynamic and also accessible way that people can understand and care and know about things that very few people can deliver it in the way that he's delivered it. And so I think he's a master communicator, and I admire that about him. And his book is also really great.
No, Trevor Noah is definitely an inspiration of mine as well. Love the way he communicates. I think you broke it down very clearly. He takes the biggest topic and he breaks it down into such easy, digestible pieces of information, and you can't ignore the facts when it's laid out like that. And I think that's what a lot of people need. I've noticed that comprehension and critical thinking is something that we could do more of in our society to really understand one another, and empathy as well. And as a writer, you're trusted with that, conveying a message, but also ensuring that people understand it and it translates. So that's really good. So how then did Dubai happen? So you are in South Africa, I presume. Did you move anywhere else, or was it South Africa straight to Dubai? And did you come because of business, career, love, romance, fun? What is it that brought you to this wonderful land?
Yeah, so after the pandemic, I started traveling because I graduated just before the pandemic started, and I always wanted to travel. And one of the first places in my digital nomad journey was Kenya.
Yeah.
And I spent a month in Kenya just working remotely. And then I met my partner there and ended up visiting Dubai. And then I visited Dubai again, and then I was suddenly living in Dubai. So I guess you could say that it was love.
Yeah, it was definitely love. That's nice. And that's not a story that a lot of people have about Dubai, when it comes to love and Dubai. Usually it's business, usually it's career, it's all that sort of stuff. So great to see that, of course, you've had a good transition from there. Now that you're in Dubai, how long have you actually been living here in Dubai now?
2022, so
2022.
almost hitting towards 3 years now.
Almost hitting towards 3 years. Okay. And was there a particular moment that you felt like this is the right place for me and the mission that I have?
I'm having that moment more and more now. So in the beginning, I struggled. I struggled because of the outdoor. I didn't realize that I enjoyed like outdoors and nature and going for runs and walks and stuff. But more and more that I've sort of traveled to other countries and looked at the potential of living there, I'm realizing that at this point of the career, there's a lot of benefits of Dubai. Not paying taxes means like you, I have a podcast, I can invest money into a podcast. I probably wouldn't be able to do that as much if I was paying taxes in somewhere like the UK. So, and then there's the opportunities, like going to events and meeting incredible people like you. And there's just this sort of mindset of people are here and they want to grow. And I know by the time I left South Africa, I felt like that I didn't have that mindset. It was very hard to find people who also felt like they wanted to keep growing their businesses, their careers and stuff. There was more of get a comfortable job, get a house, live a good life.
The traditional
and,
route, right?
Yeah, and I think Dubai exposes you to a lot of people who are looking for something else. And I wouldn't say, a big part of my brand is to be authentic. I wouldn't say it doesn't come without challenges. I think Dubai is also a very lonely place. I have struggled to make friends here more than I have anywhere else in the world. I've thought that I'm a master at making friends as an adult because I've lived in so many places and connected with so many great people, and I have this international network of friends. And in Dubai, I'd sometimes question myself and be like, is something wrong with me? Why you meet people, but then you feel like it's sort of the conversation is not going past a certain level. It's kind of superficial. I'm is this me? Am I the problem here? Just in that brand of authenticity, I don't want to paint it all as a shining, perfect experience.
No, that's true. I think, Dubai has been a blessing for both of us. I think we've had this conversation previously just in terms of the opportunities. And I think the biggest thing that you said there was surrounding yourself with like-minded people. And I think Dubai has done a great job of curating this environment for creators, for entrepreneurs to sort of just come together and excel, think, put ideas together. And the pace of idea to execution is so quick here. In some cultures, I think in the UK anyway, you have an idea, but then there's just so many no's, so many, there's this, so many, do I want to consider that? There's a lot of rejection. Before we jump into that topic, but maybe not rejection. There's a lot of roadblocks before you can get to execution.
It's almost self-rejection.
It's
no, that's not possible. Can't do that. Can't do that. And that mindset, it's hard. You especially as someone who wants to go after things, and if everyone around you is saying, and I faced that in South Africa, building a business, as people would be like, no, South Africans can't. I remember this in my university lecture. They brought in a freelance writer who was working full-time as a freelance writer. And she was like, you're going to work really long hours. You're going to get underpaid. You are, someone put their hand up and was like, what about working overseas, like American? And she's like, no, they'll pay you really badly because you're from South Africa. And that to me is really self-limiting, because now no one wants to go after these things because that's the kind of mindset. And I think that's where those limitations of your environment come in. Whereas in Dubai, there's you want to raise a bunch of money? Sure, we can do that.
Definitely. I think it's also to do with abundance, right? There's this abundance mindset that you have here where in some societies it's a little bit difficult. And I think for South Africa, Zimbabwe, even the UK, I think a lot of people are in survival mode. So they don't intentionally realize that they're doing that. So they're just looking at protecting themselves. They think they're protecting themselves, but really they're putting roadblocks to their success. I think that was a great transition into our topic on rejection. And this is really where I wanted us to explore and discuss. You have a very successful podcast called My Rejection Story. And on your podcast, you bring guests and, you give them the opportunity and the platform to share their story about rejection. But today it's you that's in the hot seats, we're taking a little reverse. So Alice, could you please share us what is your rejection story?
Ooh, that's a big story, a big question. I'm feeling the hot seat is burning. It goes back a little bit, not too long ago. But I once did a podcast episode on this, and I think that it is a big reason why I started the podcast. I look at my life in two parts. I look at my life before 2020, and I look at my life after 2020. In 2020, so end of 2019, that's when I graduated university. And my father had dementia, and he was starting to show symptoms about 2018, just behavioral changes and stuff. His partner left him in, I think, maybe beginning of 2019, end of 2018. And I understood why at that point. It was a lot of personality changes. She didn't think he'd ever be the same person, but we didn't know how bad it would get.
Yeah.
But it continued getting bad, and by the time I graduated, I knew I needed to go home. I thought at the time that I could go and help him set some systems in place, like, because his life was a bit out of order, like set a budget and help him like organize some things, and then he could go carry on living just in a more organized way. But that's not what was happening. He was regressing all the time. And so 2020 ended up being the hardest year of my life. I ended up moving home with him. I felt like I didn't have much of a support system. I had my mom and I had my grandparents who were very helpful, but it also, like, they had their own priorities. My grandparents were aging. My mom, this is her ex-husband, and like, she's going to help us, but she's not going to like step in and be his caregiver. And my brother was in a different city and had different priorities. So it was very isolating. It was a pandemic, so I was isolated from friends. And at the time, my mindset was, this is going to be my life now. I'm just going to look after my dad. Like, I was very ambitious. I wanted to like go maybe live in America and pursue a career in journalism. And I was like, none of that's going to happen. Now I'm just like here looking after my dad. And that luckily didn't happen. As things did settle down for him, my family put in some calls to find out if anyone would be interested in kind of replacing the role I had, which was being like his driver and companion and like person doing his grocery shopping with him, because he was still like, and we found someone who was just lovely, like super empathetic, super warm. But that period of my life, I felt like I lost my ambition. I felt like, in some sense, lost my ambition. I couldn't work. I couldn't write. I just went on walks and read every day. Before that all happened, I was someone deathly afraid of rejection. I would never go talk to someone and be like, hey, you want to grab a coffee, because I thought that they were an interesting person to network with. Or I would never I had a crush on this guy in university for like 2 years. I'd never tell him that I had because that rejection I felt like would destroy me if he rejected me. And I felt like I had a massive personality shift after this. So after living with my dad for a while, and after we hired this guy to help look after, and things settled down, and I processed the grief of losing my dad, because it was obviously a lot of grief, and I'm still processing it, but I think I went through the worst of it back then. I became so ambitious, and I just worked on my business day and night. That's where my business really was born. And I worked with mentors in America, and I just lived and breathed this thing. But I tapped into this audacious side of me where I just was like, who cares if I'm rejected? Who cares? I have this vision and I want this. And that translated into other areas. For the first time in my life, I started dating intentionally. And it was like, who cares if someone rejects me? I survived. I survived something way worse than rejection. I survived, one of the worst things that I felt like could happen. I moved to a new city, and I made a whole new friend group. Before that, I think I was a very insecure person, so I sort of latched onto friends who maybe weren't always that kind. And I just was able to let go of any relationships that weren't serving me, and I just had this wonderful friend group. And it felt like I tapped into a power, this no longer fearing rejection. It was like a power. And I now have just become so curious, because I think that those kinds of setbacks in life can do one of two things to people. They can either be fuel for something great. And of course, everything comes with good and bad. It's still the bad part. You would never wish these bad things to happen to us. I don't think you should go and hope that something bad's going to happen to you. But I think that the human experience is that bad things will happen to all of us. And then, but for some people, it can be that fuel that informs them going forward. And for other people, it can really hold them back. It can really be my life's over. What's the point and stuff. And now I'm just very curious about like, what is the differentiator here? How can we make it a fuel and not a setback?
Yeah, that is honestly so inspiring. And I think first, I want to say sorry for your loss, of course. Losing a parent is nothing that's easy, and it's difficult. And how you were able to navigate that with family and support. I think I'm picking out some things just from that story, that there was a support system there. But of course, no one knows how difficult that experience can really, really be. And you to be able to come out on the other side, like you said, and get a perspective of using that as fuel. I think that's really where the story, or at least this conversation, I sort of want to explore, because rejection can be so personal, even at times when it's not. Like you said, the human experience is that bad things will happen to each and every one of us. But so often we're like, why me? Why me? As if no one else experiences exactly what we've experienced. So in just your thought, why do you think rejection is so personal when sometimes it's not?
I think that we have been hardwired, like it's in our brain, to hate rejection.
Yeah.
And that is survival. So if you go back like 100 years, let's say we're all living in communities, your job is to go hunt the buffalo, and my job is to, I don't know, like gendered, my job is to like pick the tomatoes and whatever. If my community rejects me and says, I'm sorry, Alice, you're doing a bad job of picking tomatoes, we don't want you anymore, out, I could die. Like, no one's going to be bringing me back the meats. No one's going to be giving me shelter. No one's going to be doing anything. So I think that there is this part of our brain that sees any potential rejection as a deathly threat to our survival. So there are studies that rejection causes more physical pain than often like actual physical pain. We remember the pain of rejection more vividly than other pain. So if you think of like a woman giving childbirth, apparently that's very painful. Haven't gone through it, but I've heard that. So, but often people forget, and then they do it again, and then they only remember when they're doing it again how painful it was. Whereas people very rarely forget the pain of rejection. So maybe someone broke up with you, broke your heart, and that was 10 years ago. And you're still scared of putting yourself out there because you remember so vividly how much that
talking
hurts.
to me. I think you're talking to me. Okay.
Another topic.
That's another topic. But
and that's because it's in our survival to not want to get rejected. But then when we fear it so much that we don't do the things that put us in the wake of rejection, we end up self-rejecting, which in my opinion can be much worse and really stop us from pursuing growth, pursuing opportunities, pursuing so many other things. But it's normal to hurt when rejection happens. It makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's really, really, really true. I mean, you're so correct in that the feeling of rejection, it really is painful. I think you feel that pain, and sometimes you repeat again and again and again in your mind, and you're repeating that moment over and over again, and it becomes sort of a part of you. You carry that rejection as you move forward in life, and it can be really, really difficult. Just to take you back to, of course, your rejection story, and those difficult times, grieving your father and letting go of that process. What are some of the things that you were saying to yourself? Because you said it's almost like you woke up and you said, I've gone through the worst thing that could possibly happen, and there's nothing that can be worse than this. But what was it that you did? Did you say anything to yourself? What was your mindset like? How did you make that switch?
It's a good question. I don't remember like overtly making a switch. I remember feeling the pain of everything and feeling very, very hopeless. And then when that sort of shifted and kind of, I guess, a new season of life started and I became very obsessed with my business, it just felt like that burden of like, what if I get rejected? What if something happens? Was no longer there. And I think that it was simply just knowing that the world doesn't end when something bad happens, because sometimes you just don't know, like, like if this person rejects me, is the whole world going to come crumbling apart? And that's when I actually talk about this a lot, is building a rejection resilience muscle. When we expose ourselves to rejection, we start reminding ourselves and proving to ourselves that things don't end. Like it's not, your brain thinks the whole world's going to implode. And it's like, well, actually, it's not. I'm surviving this. I think perhaps also like being so isolated at that period, so much of my fear, like of social rejection, is like, what if people don't want to be my friend and stuff? And it was like, well, I wasn't around friends for a long time. That's not ideal, obviously, but I think it's just knowing that you can survive something hard. And something that one of my guests said on a podcast that I think is so good is, like, I wouldn't recommend trying to chase bad things happening to you, but he says that you could actually curate kind of hard experiences that you survive, like jumping out of a plane, for example.
Yes.
So, like, that's not a traumatic experience, but it might be something that terrifies you.
Yes.
And once you've done it once, you have that muscle memory that I can do hard things. It's not. I have this picture of myself as someone that isn't brave, isn't going to go out there and pursue things, but now it's a different picture because you jumped out. You're a person that jumps out of a plane.
Exactly. No, that's really, really, really powerful, actually. And it's funny that you said your guest said that, because it reminds me of Will Smith when he gave this, I think it was a speech or a talk, and he was talking about how the best things in life are on the other side of fear, right? And he described how he jumped out of a plane, and of course that feeling of like the scariest thing, now he feels like anything is possible, and I've sort of adapted it. But I didn't realize that's what I was doing. So a couple of years ago, I said to myself, I want to start every year by doing the hardest thing possible, so that I know that the rest of the year is going to be easy. Because if I start the year on this, anything is possible. So I remember I walked with lions when I was in Africa. And of course, jumping out of a plane is on the list to do. But like, I put myself in those environments, and I didn't realize I was building, this rejection resilience. And it's something that you can actually do. So to the average person or someone listening, what is something that they can potentially do daily to build that resilience muscle? So maybe not jumping out of a plane or walking with lions or, standing up and telling someone they love them, What are the little things that they can do to build that resilience muscle to rejection?
Yeah, it's a good question, because not everyone has the opportunity to jump out of planes and walk with lions. I would say, like, so I talk about them as micro-rejections. So I'm sure people have seen on social media, some people do these like rejection challenges where they go and crazy things like ask a restaurant if they can change the Wi-Fi password or something. But there's little things that you can do, like you could, let's say you're having a coffee, you could ask, can you give me a discount on this coffee? Like, why would they give you a discount? Maybe they will, but like, it's a very random thing, but it has low impact on you and your reputation. So a big rejection, not necessarily a big rejection, but a rejection that might have more, like, be scarier, is if it's going to impact your reputation. So that's if you go and tell the girl you really like that you love her, like, that rejection will really impact you if it doesn't go as planned. But if you are asking a stranger if you can get a discount on the coffee, if you're phoning your insurance people and saying, can you lower my insurance premium? If you're going to a hotel and saying, can you give me a free room upgrade? If you are booking a podcast studio and saying, can you have any discounts?
Give us an extra hour.
Give me an extra hour. Like, I'll share you my story. Pitch an influencer if they want to do a collaboration with you. All of those interactions with strangers are probably not going to impact your reputation, because one, we don't really remember people we reject. Like, I don't know, I'm sure you get lots of pictures and stuff, and when people reject, when you reject someone, like, you think, I'm not interested, you probably don't remember who they are, because it was probably a unmemorable pitch. People think that, like, it's so scary to ask, like, say to this person, can we do this thing and stuff, but most of the time, if it's a stranger, they're not going to remember, and they're also not part of your community already. Because I think the thing that's so scary about rejection is being ousted from your existing community. So these
Yeah.
micro-rejections are coming from people outside of your community, usually strangers.
Okay, great. Yeah, those are some really, really good tangible tips that we can really use in our lives to, be better on a day-to-day level. And skipping from day to day, rejection happens every day, like we discussed. However, rejection isn't just a one-time thing. There are some people that have been facing rejection for a long period of time. So if you're looking for a job and you're constantly getting no, and it's been months and it's been months and it's months, if you're trying for something and you just don't feel like it's working out, rejection over an extended period of time can really, really, really be brutal. What are some things that maybe you've noticed from your podcast, speaking to people who have overcome rejection, maybe some rejection that lasted a year, 2 years, 3 years? How can they develop that resilience muscle over years?
This is a very good question. Because I think that if you're getting consistently rejected for a very long time, the answer is not just to keep putting yourself in the wake of rejection. It's to do things a little bit differently. A very, very important thing that we haven't touched on is community.
Yeah.
So, like we gave that example of, let's say there's a tribe and I get kicked out. That's what my brain says when someone says to me in the street, now, I don't like you. My brain will go like, oh my God, I'm getting kicked out of the tribe, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
So one way to override rejection is to rely on your community. So if, for example, I get a really rude response to a pitch that I send, if I sit and ruminate over that by myself, I'm just going to feel more ashamed, less likely to put myself out there again.
Yeah.
But if I turn to people that I trust, whose judgment I trust, so they're not just going to say nice things for the sake of saying nice things, then I get that reminder that, okay, it's not about me, it's about them. I'm safe, I'm good.
Yeah.
So really finding like those core people, the people that are in your corner who might tell you things you need to hear, like, oh, maybe that wasn't the best pitch, but also that response was unfair. Like, that just shows you, okay, my community still accepts me, I'm safe.
Yeah.
If you're getting rejected over and over, I would turn to the community for feedback.
Yeah.
Like, for example, and I didn't share this earlier, but how I started my writing journey as a freelancer is I did a 100 rejection challenge, which was to get rejected 100 times.
Nice.
And it was like a community-wide thing.
Yeah.
And you rely on community for that.
Yeah.
But a big part of that is if you're getting rejected for every single one of them, you would share that with the community and they're going to look at it and they're going to be like, I think your pitches need a stronger story hook. I think they need a better subject line. They need something else.
Yeah.
So if you're getting rejected over and over for job opportunities, you want to find a community of people you trust with good expertise who can say, hey man, your CV sucks. Like, you're really good at what you do, but the way you're presenting it in your resume, it's not matching up.
Yeah.
I think you need to shorten it to one page. You need to put in like a catchy blurb. I think you need to show some of the results from your jobs.
Yeah.
So that community can not only help you feel safe, but it can also help you improve your strategy.
Yeah.
And I think you want to, if you're getting rejected over and over, you want to take a look at what am I doing, what's not working, and what can change. And community can help you do that.
Yeah, community. That is, that's so powerful. And I think a lot of people nowadays, because society is pushing us to be very independent.
Individualistic.
And, I did this myself, I built myself, I made myself into this person. There's less emphasis on community, less emphasis on growing, building together. Everyone wants to be at the top of the mountain with the prize and have everyone feel like they did it themselves, right? So it's challenging. And I can imagine for a lot of people, it's challenging to break from that mindset of, I got to do it alone, to I need other people to help me, because there's also, once again, that fear of what if these people I go to turn around and, reject me, because I've been rejected already. Now the people I'm seeking for help are rejecting me, right? So how then would you sort of approach that angle? Like, what advice would you give to people to find, I guess, a safe space to have healthy rejection?
I'd say be a safe space to other people. I think one of the great pieces of advice I saw in friendship is offer close friendships to other people first. So, for example, like you'd be close friends with someone if, like, it's considered you're close friends with someone if you're going to deliver them cooked food because they're going through a hard time. Don't wait until someone does that for you. Do that for them first. Because that already like kind of bridges that, like, okay, you are someone that cares for me, trusts me. So see if you can help find people who you respect, think are smart. See if you can help them. Offer them that service. Say like, hey, I really respect your work, but I'm really good in like photos. Can I help you? And you know, do kind of those sort of trade exchanges, meetups. Be of service to people you think are valuable. And I think that every successful person, whether they like to admit it or not, is there because of their community. We spoke about this earlier, like setting kind of like a blueprint, and you need to see it to be it. I wouldn't have built my business if it wasn't for mentors who just happened to show me how to pitch, how to network with Americans, how to land, pitch American publications, people who were extremely selfless in helping me. And to find those people, I think you just need to be yourself, be open-minded, and be in service to other people.
That's really true. It starts with you, and it starts with self. It starts by obviously being what you want to experience in life. So, now thank you for sharing that. And of course, you mentioned that successful people are not self-made; they're built by community. So, when it comes to rejection, what are some key traits that you've noticed in the most successful people that allows them to, you know, weather rejection? Maybe someone that you've interviewed on your podcast, someone that you admire. What are like those key traits that make someone able to overcome rejection?
This is a good question. I think that people who, they're self-aware. I'd say that's number one. They're self-aware. So they're self-aware enough to know that even if a rejection is happening and it hurts, they know how to deal with it. They know who to turn to. They know what strategies to take. They also turn to community. So again, community. They rely on their community. They usually have very high authority, trusted people in their corner. So if they're an author, they have other authors in their corner. If they're a businessman or a businesswoman, they have other people in that industry they can turn to. They take swift action. So I think the worst thing that you can do, it's like that metaphor of if you fall off a horse, or it's an actual horse riding community. If you fall off a horse, you need to get back on straight away. Otherwise, you'll never get back on. Taking swift action is also, the confidence comes from action. It doesn't come from knowing everything. So if they are rejected, things don't go right, they very quickly pivot and get into action mode. So I'd say self-awareness, community, and taking swift action.
Yeah, no, that's really, really strong. And I'm seeing community keeps coming up again and again. And I think, that really makes a difference. Like when you mull and sit in rejection for too long and you isolate yourself, oh my goodness, you spiral, and it could really be the worst. So now those are definitely some good tips that can support you on that journey to overcome a rejection. And you mentioned earlier that you pivoted, or you evolved, or you learned, you became the best version of you from starting a business after rejection, right? So the rejection that you experienced led you to creating this business in that moment. What inspired the name Hustling Writers? I'm really curious as to where that came from.
I don't know if I have a good answer here. It was 2020 and I was setting up a website and I was brainstorming names. Names. My brother was visiting. He lived in Cape Town and we were in like KZN. So he was visiting for the holidays. So I was brainstorming names between my brother and my mentor in the States. So I would like get a name idea, send it to my mentor, and she'd be like, nah, that sounds too corporate-y. And I'd say a name to my brother. And Hustling Writers was one that just passed the test to everyone. They were like, yeah, that sounds good. Everyone said it sounds good. So I was like, okay, I guess Hustling Writers it is.
Hustling Writers, yeah. No, it's good. It's a good mindset. And I think usually we underestimate the power of names. and what a name can do to something, right? Because when I heard it, it really made me feel like, okay, these are go-getters. These are people who are going to hustle. And, you know, the connotations of hustling is not waiting for things to come to you. You're going out there and making it happen, right? And as a creative, that's something that you have to do. You can't wait for things. So please just share us more insights, because like I said, I'm interested in mindset, and this is what we do here at the Invincible Minds podcast. We want to explore the mind and the steps that you took. So you experienced rejection, and that led you to create a business. And you said that you were almost obsessive in that first instance. You poured everything into that business, right? I just want to know, like, what were those steps that you took to build Hustling Writers in the midst of rejection? What steps did you take? What came first? And for someone who wants to start a business, you know, what did that look like?
The recurring theme, community. So the mentor I mentioned, her name is Jules Costa. I'll give her credit here. She was like probably like 2 steps ahead of me in the business space. So at that point, like I was just taking on whatever work came my way. And Jules was making like regular 6-figure months. And so she was on the ground teaching me everything as she knew it. She's like, this is how I conduct sales calls. This is how I like create client decks, and everything was being taught to me. And so I was just executing. And Jules also created a community very into mentorship, where she was mentoring other people. So we would have these like accountability calls. So that definitely there was this intense learning period, this intense and learning like from seeing someone get results, not like watching a course where it's like, okay, this is how you do a business and stuff. It's like, this is someone I know, and they're just telling me right now that they closed this $6,000 contract and this is how they did it. So it's very motivating. You're like, okay, me too.
You're seeing it, right?
Buckle up my shoes. Yeah, so definitely there was that like, and I was very fortunate. I give absolute, like I don't take that for granted. I think I was very lucky and fortunate in that sense. And so there was that intense period of learning, having a community that really inspired me. It's like the see it to be it. And then just being scrappy. Like I remember I had this HP laptop with the most awful webcam and I would show up on calls and I'm just mortified thinking about it now. Like it was a blurry picture of me. Like I had to like close everything just so that Zoom didn't like use up all the CPU. But I was just doing whatever I could with what I had and applying for everything. I was very open-minded. So like someone said, there's a social media gig, I took that. If someone said there's this website writing gig, I took that. And I just figured out what landed. And that's how Hustling Writers is doing PR, specifically podcast and some publication PR, where we like book a lot of speakers, authors, keynote business owners onto podcasts and publications. That was completely by accident. I was doing a lot of things, and one of them was that the client said, hey, you pitch yourself to magazines. Surely you can figure out how to pitch us to podcasts and also pitch us to magazines. And then they really liked that. And it was my mentor again who said, ditch everything else, focus on this. This is what people want. And so I did that, but I never would have known that if I wasn't just experimenting with everything and being very open-minded to the whole process of service delivery.
Yeah, no, that's true. The journey isn't really straightforward, you know. You took action and you were open to experiencing as many things as possible. So that's really, really good. And I think that's definitely something that when you're trying to figure out your steps or maneuver, you shouldn't, I mean, it's tempting to try to lock yourself into one lane and just think I should do this. This is the thing that I've always known. But just be open to learn, be open to explore, and you never know where that can take you. You know, start where you are, even with the laptop that you had at the time. You know, and see how far you can go. So now that's really inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah. I think also it's something I would add to that is that. It wasn't all like, I didn't do it all right. Like I sucked at some things. And I think that you can, the interesting thing with niching, because niching is a very quick way to establish yourself as an authority. I think that you can position yourself as when you're starting out and you're trying to figure out what you're good at and what you want to do, you can position yourself as a niche expert in a couple of industries, just in the way that you apply for job or gigs, the way you present applications. You can say, like, I remember I used to write so many cover letters, and in all of them I would say that I'm a food writer. And then I would pick, because I did like a lot of writing and stuff, I would pick every piece from my portfolio of food writing that I did and present that. And they'd be like, okay, she's a food writer, but someone else, I'm a travel writer. And I'll pick everything that I'd done travel related. So you can experiment and figure out what your niche is and just position yourself as the expert in that way.
Cool. Thank you so much, Alice, for sharing that inspiring story on how you've built Hustling Writers. Now we're going to move on to the final section of our podcast, and this is a little bit of fun. It is called Wisdom Drops, and essentially I'm going to give you a few questions, and you just have to answer as direct as possible, and the first thing that comes to your mind, an honest and clear answer. Are you ready for this?
I think so.
Yeah, nice, cool. So the first question. What one lesson has rejection taught you that success never could?
Be adaptable.
Be adaptable. What's your go-to way to bounce back from rejection?
Community.
Community. Yeah, our favorite word, right, from this podcast, community. Okay, what is one piece of advice you'd give to someone who fears rejection?
Start small. Start small and build up from there.
Start small and build up from there. Perfect. And the next one, fill in the blank. Rejection is...
Redirection. That's pretty obvious one. But
yeah, rejection is redirection. That's the title of our episode as well. So that's good. And last one, if there is one thing that you would like to be remembered for after all is said and done, what is that one thing, Alice?
I should have prepared for this. I know you've asked other guests this. I think hopefully as someone that has offered meaningful insights to the world, hopefully changed some people's lives for the better, made the world more accessible in some shape or form.
Yeah, better place. Nah, thank you so much. You know what, Alice, I think that's a great place to end in a very, very powerful mission to have. Thank you again for coming onto our podcast and sharing about rejection, sharing your story and giving us such wisdom and insights. I think there's a lot that I've definitely learned, the small tangible steps. You know, I'm going to be that guy who's going to be asking all the questions, seeking rejection rather than running from it. So now, thank you so much. For our followers and subscribers, where can they find you?
If you type in My Rejection Story on any of the podcast apps, you will find the podcast. Otherwise, I'm on Instagram at Alice Draper.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Great. So thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. And remember, rejection is redirection. If we've learned anything from Alice's story today, is to be adaptable and to seek out rejection. And it will surprise you just how wonderful life can be on the other side of rejection. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, stay invincible.